Make America Great Again. It's more than a slogan, it's a diagnosis, a confession of perceived loss. For decades, commentators have debated a single unnerving question. Is the United States in decline? We are living in an age of conflicting signals. The stock market reaches dizzying new heights, fueled by a technological boom unlike any other. Yet, on the ground, we hear stories of social fabric tearing apart, of forgotten towns and spiraling inequality. We see headlines of a rising China, of endless costly wars, and deep, seemingly unbridgeable divisions at home. It's easy to look at this picture and conclude the American empire is crumbling, but collapse is a dramatic and perhaps misleading word. It suggests a sudden catastrophic fall like Rome or the Soviet Union. The truth is far more complex and far more interesting. The story of America's changing power isn't about a sudden collapse. It's about a slow, grinding confrontation with a rival it cannot bully, and the radical, painful choices it's now forced to make to stay in the game. This isn't the end of American power, but its transformation into something we've never seen before. To understand where we are, we must travel back to 1985. The setting, New York's Plaza Hotel. The United States, the undisputed leader of the free world, was facing a severe economic threat from within its own camp. A massive trade deficit with two of its key allies, Japan and Germany, was hollowing out American industry. Their economies, rebuilt under America's protection, were now flooding the U.S. with high-quality cars and electronics. America's response was a masterclass in hegemonic power. A state's strength rests on four pillars: economic, military, cultural, and the political power that binds them. When its economic pillar was threatened, the U.S. simply leaned on its military one. Japan and Germany were not sovereign equals in this negotiation. They were fundamentally protectorates, dependent on the vast U.S. security umbrella. So, in the quiet wood-paneled rooms of the plaza, an accord was reached. It was a polite term for a dictated peace. Japan and Germany were pressured to artificially strengthen their currencies. For their economies, this was a devastating blow. The move crippled their export-driven models, and for Japan, triggered a massive asset price bubble that burst spectacularly, leading to a lost decade, from which it has arguably never fully recovered. Germany weathered the storm better, partly because the fall of the Berlin Wall soon after gave it access to a new pool of cheap labor. But the lesson was clear. In America's orbit, your prosperity was conditional. The playbook was simple and brutally effective. For over 30 years, that playbook seemed unbeatable. Then a new challenger emerged, one who had studied the game and refused to play by the old rules. This rival wasn't like the Soviet Union, which was a military titan with an economy of a second-rate power. This was China, a civilization state with the economic scale, the technological ambition, and the military might to challenge America on every front. When the U.S. found itself facing an even more staggering trade deficit with China in the 2010s, it instinctively reached for the old playbook. But it was useless. China is not post-war Japan. It is not militarily dependent on the United States. It is building a blue water navy, pioneering hypersonic missiles, and has no need for an American security umbrella. The Trump administration tried a direct assault, tariffs and trade wars. But China didn't fold. It absorbed the blows, retaliated in kind, and leveraged its central role in global supply chains. The turbulence ended in a stalemate the U.S. economy could ill afford. For the first time in nearly a century, the United States was facing a true peer competitor, a rival it could not simply command or intimidate. It would have to learn a new game, not domination, but competition. And this is the crucial turning point of our story, the revelation of our modern era. The competition with China is forcing the United States to make a series of radical, agonizing choices. To stay ahead, America has concluded it must shed its old burdens and focus its vast resources with a ruthless, single-minded intensity. The cost of being the world's policeman is now reframed as a liability, a critical drain on the treasure needed for the main event. Every billion spent propping up security in Europe or policing the Middle East is a billion not invested in the technological arms race. And so we see the U.S. strategically, deliberately stepping back from its role as global protector. But the most profound change is happening at home. To win the race for supremacy in fields like AI and quantum computing, America is creating a new, hyper-concentrated Gilded Age. Tech giants are funneling unfathomable sums into R&D, offering salaries of $500,000 to engineers, not just to innovate, but to hoard the world's intellectual capital and deny it to Beijing. The price of this technological war is paid by the rest of society. It's seen in rising crime rates, neglected infrastructure, and the staggering new class divide, not just between rich and poor, but between those inside the tech fortress and everyone else. It is a conscious, strategic sacrifice of social cohesion for the sake of maintaining technological leadership. The ripple effects of this strategic pivot are redrawing the world map. America's inward turn is not happening in a vacuum. It is forcing a global realignment. Old allies, long accustomed to the comfort and constraints of the American security guarantee, are being forced to stand on their own. Europe, awakened by the brutal war in Ukraine and the clear signals of American disengagement, is in a frantic scramble to rearm. Germany is pouring tens of billions into its military. France is championing strategic autonomy. Nations from Poland to Sweden are rebuilding their defense industries. The transatlantic pact that defined the 20th century is transforming from a relationship of dependence to one of uneasy partnership. This unraveling is not a sign of American weakness, but a consequence of its new focus. The US is not being pushed off the world stage. It is walking away from certain parts of it to reinforce the stage's core. A new, messy, and far more dangerous multipolar world is emerging, not because America collapsed, but because it chose to marshal its strength for a different kind of fight. So, let's return to our original question. Is the US losing power? The evidence suggests losing is the wrong verb. The US is repositioning its power. It's true that it can no longer dictate terms to the world as it did in 1985, but the pillars of its power remain formidable. The US dollar is still the world's reserve currency. Its elite universities and corporations are magnets for global talent. Its cultural soft power, though contested, is immense. And its system of military alliances, even as it shifts, is unparalleled. The decline we perceive is not a crumbling of strength, but the shedding of responsibilities. Faced with a challenger it cannot easily dominate, the US is transforming from a global hegemon into a global competitor. This is a post-hegemonic repositioning, a pivot born of necessity with enormous consequences for its allies and its own citizens. It's a story of painful, high-stakes adaptation, and it leaves us with the real question for the 21st century. In this new era of great power competition, what does it mean to truly be great, and what will be the ultimate price of that greatness?